Serpent, Scion by Orphan Account. Read by Kaiinbed. Chapter 12. Sensory Overload. Severus can still feel his heart pounding. It cannot be true. It's way too surreal. Yet, the evidence is right in front of him. Dumbledore's body is disappearing quickly in 3 extremely hungry mouths. The Cerberus's sharp teeth tear the old wizard's corpse into pieces and swallow them greedily. Blood is splattering all over the place. The potions lab's floor is covered in blood. The Cerberus's 3 mouths are dripping with blood. Blood. It's everywhere. Should Severus be disturbed about the fact that they are casually feeding the headmaster's body to the giant dog? Killing the despised, manipulative, self-proclaimed Light Lord is one thing. Disposing his corpse this way is a completely different story. But then again, there they are. Harry and Voldemort standing dangerously close to the giant creature and apparently perfectly comfortable with the horrifying sight of Dumbledore being eaten. They definitely behaved too frivolously for the given circumstances. Leaving Severus to take care of the unconscious Quirrell, they recklessly went upstairs, protected only by a generic disillusionment charm. Severus didn't even try to figure out how they had actually managed to bring the Cerberus down to the dungeons, unnoticed by anybody. I didn't want the old coot to become a martyr. What would definitely happen if we decided to give him a proper burial? Voldemort explains to Harry. He still had way too many followers and supporters. His grave would have possibly become their place of gathering, which might have given birth to a new hostile movement. True, Harry admits, touching the Cerberus's paw. Besides, Dumbledore has sentenced this Cerberus to long months in captivity in appalling conditions. The giant fella deserves to at least snack on the old coot's worthless body. Severus exhales slowly. The conversation between 2 parcel mouths is so lighthearted and calm, so inadequate to the given circumstances. Tell me, cousin, Harry says airily. I was wondering how should I actually address you. I know you hate your given name because you share it with your muggle father. I also know that I cannot use the new name you have given yourself because it upsets Severus's snake. Is there any other name I could call you? Voldemort's thin lips curl up into a smile. What was that name you were calling me before, young cousin? Harry grins. Scarlet-eyed. Well, that would be an appropriate name, don't you think? You may call me Scarlet. Snape flinches. Is it really appropriate to call the Dark Lord Scarlet? Well, definitely not for one of his Death Eaters, but for a young cousin of his. It may actually be plausible. Severus, the Dark Lord says unexpectedly, turning towards the young man. Did Dumbledore used to violate your dark mark? Severus hangs his head down. Yes, my lord, he admits reluctantly. Voldemort narrows his red eyes and extends his hand towards Severus. Snape clenches his teeth and rolls up his left sleeve, showing his forearm to the Dark Lord. Voldemort mutters something, eyeing Snape's mark cautiously. He presses his white thin finger against the snake and starts whispering in Parseltongue. The snake starts writhing like a caged animal at first, but progressively relaxes under the Dark Lord's touch. Snape exhales slowly, as a pleasant warmth radiating from his mark washes all over his exhausted body. The old fool had been messing with it. Voldemort hisses angrily. He has polluted it with his touch. That is an abomination. Forgive me, my lord, Severus whispers. That's not your fault, Severus. The Dark Lord replies in a softer tone. Scarlet! Harry exclaims. Were you the one to burn the snake into Severus's skin? I knew only a fellow speaker could be able to do this. Voldemort nods, still focusing his attention on the slowly writhing snake. I saw Dumbledore hurting it, many times. The Dark Lord's eyes widen. He turns his head towards the boy. I was able to calm it down, but not fix it, Harry goes on, indicating the snake. It's still squeamish and jumpy. I assume that only its creator can fix this damage. Severus feels a pleasant shiver when the snake on his mark stops writhing and freezes. "Thank you, my lord," Snape whispers. Voldemort nods. "Harry." He turns towards the boy. "You've mentioned that your familiar has suffered injuries from Dumbledore's hand as well." Harry reaches into his chest pocket and pulls out the tiny mutilated grass snake. The serpent, jolted, opens his bright yellow eyes. "This is Grassy," Harry says quietly. "He was injured in the explosion. His tail basically blasted apart, leaving him permanently crippled. With such a large part of his body gone, he cannot move around on his own anymore." Voldemort nods and waves his wand, summoning non-verbally the glass vial with the elixir of life's leftovers. Harry gasps and steps forward, extending Grassy towards Voldemort. The Dark Lord takes the snake gently from the boy's hand. "I need you to tilt your head back and open your mouth, little one." Grassy, half asleep and clearly confused, obeys the command absently. An unusual, stunning spectacle causes Severus's eyes to go watery. The Dark Lord places the vial upside down above the snake's widely open mouth. A single drop of the thick ruby-red liquid runs down the glass and falls straight into Grassy's throat. The small, bright-scaled body starts radiating dim, reddish light. Voldemort takes his hand off. Grassy hovers into the air on his own. Severus can see the reddish light reflecting in Harry's wide pupils. The boy is holding his breath, watching his familiar's body healing itself and extending. Grassy slowly building up the missing part of his backbone and ribs, wrapping them tightly with a layer of muscles and topping it off with glittery, bright scales. Harry looks at his cured familiar in a speechless disbelief. He takes Grassy gently into his hands. The small snake almost immediately falls asleep. "The process uses up a lot of energy and is exhausting for the small creature," Voldemort explains. "Let him sleep." Harry grins and places his familiar back into his chest pocket. "I cannot believe Grassy is cured," the boy says cheerfully. "Say, Scarlet, the huge dog is going with us, isn't he? Me, Grassy, and him are getting along really well. Besides, I'm sure we could use some help from the giant fella." The Dark Lord turns towards the Cerberus, who is now licking his mouth clean of Dumbledore's blood. "His species haven't been developing to live as domesticated creatures," Voldemort says. "The best thing we could do for him is releasing him into the wild." Harry looks somewhat disappointed, but he nods his head. "Besides," Voldemort goes on, "there is one more person we have to take on our journey with us." Severus frowns and shoots his lord a confused glance. "Who?" Harry asks curiously. "Come with me," Voldemort says. "I'd like you to meet my familiar from my teenage years." The Chamber of Secrets, a legendary place, believed to be created by Salazar Slytherin himself. Severus has never considered its existence to be anything more than a legend, a bedtime story for very young wizards and witches. Well, not anymore. The chamber is a high-ceiling, spacious room, filled with dim, greenish light, which seems to not have a source. The air around is incredibly humid and sweetish-scented, making it barely possible to breathe. In addition to this, it's at least 95 degrees inside. Severus is sweating. His robes, hair, and face are drenched in sweat. He's following Voldemort and Harry across the chamber, at the same time supporting half-conscious, weakened Quirrell. The weight of the young man draped over his shoulders caused Snape to sweat even more. The Dark Lord stops in the central point of the chamber and starts hissing. The command in Parseltongue is complex and incomprehensible. What happens next makes Severus flinch, step back, and almost let go of the barely conscious Quirrell. An enormous monstrosity appears from behind a moss-grown bulkhead and crawls up towards Voldemort. A giant serpent. The legendary basilisk. The creature is at least 50 feet long. Its massive body is covered with vividly green, shiny scales. Its giant head reminds more of a dragon than a snake. And its eyes. Wait, eyes? Did Severus just look into the basilisk's eyes without suffering any consequences? Yes, Severus is pretty much alive and intact despite looking straight into huge, bright yellow eyes with darker, sandy rings around each vertical pupil. Young Master Tom, the basilisk speaks, revealing a set of sharp-pointed teeth. A rotten, sweetish scent of its breath hit Severus's nostrils powerfully. Greetings, my friend. The Dark Lord's thin lips curl up into a smile. He seems genuinely happy to see his old familiar. Prepare yourself to leave this place. We are to depart together. Severus could swear that the shade of the basilisk's captivating eyes changes from bright yellow into golden amber. Depart? The giant creature repeats quietly. What about Master Salazar's assignment? It's over, my friend. You are hereby released from your post. Hogwarts is no longer under the reign of Master Salazar's enemies. Voldemort replies. The basilisk's vertical pupils widen. Young Master Tom is in charge of the castle now? He asked with clear disbelief. Yes, my friend. I am in charge now, Voldemort confirms. The giant serpent's eyes brighten, turning back to their original shade of yellow. Is Herpo really allowed to leave his post now? Herpo? Does the basilisk have a name? Severus is a well-read man and he knows history. Herpo is a name of an ancient Greek breeder who had given rise to the basilisk species through experimental crossbreeding. Yes, my friend. The days of your life in captivity and loneliness are over, Voldemort answers. Is young Master Tom going to take Herpo out of the castle? The basilisk asks. No, Herpo. The other way around. Voldemort corrects the giant serpent with a smile. It is you who is going to take us out of here. The rational part of Severus's mind understands the necessity of traveling on the basilisk's back through Hogwarts' sewage system to get outside of the castle in full strength. The rational part of his mind knows that making the giant serpent leave the castle through the front door would be both dangerous and impractical. However, clenching rough, slippery scales in his hands, desperately balancing his body to keep himself from falling, Severus dreams of literally any other way of traveling. Harry, who seems to be enjoying himself, is sitting in front of Severus, with his hands wrapped around Quirrell's midsection to prevent the weakened man from slipping off the giant serpent's back. The Dark Lord is sitting right behind the basilisk's massive head, leaning forward and whispering instructions. Severus, already fed up with traveling through a dark, narrow, claustrophobic pipe, sighs with relief, seeing light coming from an outlet. The basilisk increases its pace. Severus tightens his grip when he shoots out of the outlet like a muggle rocket. The next thing Snape knows is having his mouth, nose, and upper airways filled with water. He opens his eyes and immediately closes them, feeling unpleasant burning. Much to his relief, Basilisk manages to ascend to the water surface within a split second. Severus looks around in shock and disbelief. Voldemort leans forward to calm the giant serpent down. Harry looks stunned and confused. Quirrell is coughing violently, barely holding himself upright. The surroundings look strangely familiar. The Black Lake. They have found themselves somehow in the middle of the Black Lake. Snape turns around and gasps. A huge pipe outlet is right behind them, what clearly indicates Hogwarts' sewage system ending in the lake. All the filthy water from bathrooms, restrooms, kitchens, and potions labs is disposed in the gigantic reservoir, in the natural habitat for countless aquatic animals. How eco-conscious. Watch your heads, the Dark Lord growls, turning towards his 3 journey companions. I am going to sidelong apparate Herpo and the 3 of you as soon as we get past the anti-apparition wards. My lord, Severus cries before he manages to get a hold of himself. This beast is gigantic. Sight along apparating it is not safe at all. Do not forget who you are talking to, Severus, Voldemort replies, not obnoxiously, but also not tenderly. Severus lowers his eyes and clenches his teeth, regretting his outburst. After a couple of seconds, he feels a familiar jerk of sight-along apparition. Stormy sky, trackless water. A tiny island with a single massive triangular tower. Severus should have expected this. Voldemort is doing a logical thing, starting his reign with releasing his imprisoned followers from Azkaban. After all, wizards and witches who had decided to spend their lives in prison rather than renounce their lord are faithfully waiting for him to return. It looks like the manor in the Finlands is going to host a lot more people than Severus had initially anticipated. He tries to recall the faces and names of the imprisoned Death Eaters. A beautiful black-haired girl with unusual high cheekbones and full heart-shaped lips. 5 years Severus' senior. Her dark eyes were blazing with fire when, during her Wizengamot trial, she stood up from the accused's chair and yelled, "The Dark Lord will rise again!" on the top of her lungs, making the entire courtroom go silent. Bellatrix. 2 timid, auburn-haired brothers. One of them was Bellatrix Scoville, while the other was a year younger. Skinny, quiet, troubled boys. Rodolphus and Sebastian. A middle-aged unspeakable. Well-read, highly intelligent, working as a spy since the very beginning of the Great Wizarding War. Rookwood, a sarcastic, cynical, and foul-mouthed Eastern European rogue, uncommonly for a wizard, incredibly athletic and strong. Dolohov, looking at the intimidating triangular tower of Azkaban, Severus feels an ice-cold cramp in his stomach. The nightmarish ordeal these people have been exposed to over the last 10 years is hard to imagine. Severus! Harry's voice rouses Snape from his thoughts. I'm about to see my father again. Isn't it wonderful? Confused, Severus lifts his eyes up at the boy. Harry's face is pure, cheerful, excited, childlike. Harry, you must have misunderstood, Snape says cautiously, raising his voice to outshout the rough waves. We are not here for your father. We came here to release our imprisoned comrades in arms. Harry doesn't stop smiling. He opens his mouth to answer Severus, but at the same time both of them fall backwards and almost slip off the basilisk's back after a violent crash dockage. The giant serpent, instead of reaching the shore calmly, vigorously sprung onto the tiny island, throwing his entire crew off balance. Quirrell falls on the ground with a muffled thwack and a cry of pain. Severus curses quietly and jumps off Hercle's back, followed by Harry. In the corner of his eye, Snape sees Voldemort drawing the Elder Wand and pointing it towards the triangular tower. The Dark Lord's incantation drowns out in the sound of waves crashing against the shore. The next thing Severus sees is a massive explosion in the upper part of the prison's building. An entire pyramidal corner of the triangular tower blasts apart and turns into a pile of debris. Snape stares with wide eyes and his head painfully tilted backwards, unable to move or utter a word. He feels somebody grabbing him by the arm and jerking forward. The excess of stimuli numbs Severus' senses. He feels himself being led, almost dragged, along dark passages of Azkaban. Feeling a whiff of coldness and despair spread by the Dementors, his body reacts instinctively, reaching towards the wand and casting the Patronus, a silvery doe. Severus closes his eyes tightly. Doe. Is her image never going to stop haunting him? On second thought, Severus would rather get across Azkaban accompanied by the pain-filled doe than accompanied by a bunch of life-sucking Dementors. Climbing up countless stairs, running along the main corridor, turning towards a side passageway. Stopping. Severus flings himself to the ground, breathless and shattered. Screams. Deafening screams of joy. Severus lifts his head with an effort and opens his watery eyes. He sees Harry, running towards a broad-shouldered older wizard dressed in a ragged dark cloak. Morphin Gaunt extends his left hand towards his son to hug him. His right hand is outstretched upwards, holding a short, thick wand. A protective force field, apparently created and kept up by Gaunt, is spread upon his head like an umbrella. Severus lowers his eyes. Apart from Morphin himself, there is a small group of other people protected by his powerful shield. 5 young witches and wizards in ragged striped prison gowns. Why? Questions. They race in Severus's head as he walks alone down the shore. The fresh sea breeze and soothing sound of waves crashing against the rocks help him relax, gather his thoughts, recover from the sensory overload from the past couple of hours. The lonely stroll along the shore helps tremendously, but does not provide an answer to any questions. Can we have some water to drink? Severus freezes, hearing a weak voice. The released prisoners are sitting, gathered together, leaning against large flat rocks, wrapped tightly in thermal blankets restored from Azkaban's reserve supply room. The Dementors do the Dark Lord's bidding. Taking the 5 Death Eaters outside and emptying the storage room went unbelievably easy. Goods taken from the storage, such as food and nourishing potions, have been distributed amongst the resting prisoners, in order to get them in better shape as fast as possible. Their partial basic recovery is necessary to take them away from this place via a long-distance sight-along apparition. Water, please. Yes, of course. Severus sobers up and conjures non-verbally a small cup. Aguamenti. Filling the vessel with clean water, and hands it over to a pair of extended skinny hands. Black, curly hair, fragile frame, dark eyes burning with fire. Severus? Severus forces himself to smile. Hello, Bella, he says, trying to keep his voice airy. Bella drinks her water greedily and hands the empty cup back to Severus. Would you like some more? Snape starts. Severus! Bella cuts him off. Did Narcissa survive? Is she alive? Alive and intact, Bella. Snape answers soothingly. So is your godson Draco, who has grown up to be a fine and bright young man. Bella's full lips curl up into a smile. She closes her eyes and leans back. Severus suddenly feels an unpleasant cramp grabbing at his bowels. He falls on his knees beside the young woman. 10 years, he whispers. 10 years in this place. It's hard for me to imagine what you have been through, Bella. It would have been much worse if not for him, Bella says, lifting up her index finger to indicate somebody behind Severus's back. Taken aback, the young man turns around. Morphin and Harry, sitting a few yards away on a flat rock, catching up. Gaunt, with milky-eyed adder wrapped loosely around his neck, is holding his son on his lap. He is smiling, listening to Harry's story. The boy's face is flushed with excitement, speaking passionately, gesticulating. Severus picks himself up from the ground and approaches the parcel-mouthed duo. Harry trails off, noticing Snape's presence. Gaunt turns towards the young man. I know you, Morphin says calmly, his dark eyes brightening. You were the one to save me from this psychopathic old duffer. Severus nods absently. Why don't you sit with us, Severus? Harry offers with a smile. According to Scarlet, we have at least an hour before departure. The prisoners must regain some strength to be able to survive sight-along apparition. Snape shakes his head. Why, Gaunt? He asks quietly. Why have you willingly decided to return to Azkaban? Severus is a man of knowledge. He feels uncomfortable every time he fails to understand something obvious to other people. And Gaunt's decision is one of the most illogical, incomprehensible things he has ever heard of. Yet Harry knew about it somehow. Or at least had a right hunch. How? Why? Multiple reasons. Gaunt smiles, stroking Adder's head. First of all, there was a certain violent psychopath who hated my guts and wanted me dead for some damn reason I failed to understand. This place is an insurmountable fortress, safe even from the vile masterminds of his kind. Severus exhales slowly. Yes, Gaunt, but there must have been some other place you could go. I mean, Azkaban. Azkaban is a complete and utter shithole. I know that, lad. But even a complete shithole turns into a plausible place if you spend a majority of your freaking life here. Snape's eyes widen. That means... Yes, exactly. I've spent in this place 48 years in total, which is a major part of my life. One doesn't survive such a long time here if he doesn't learn survival skills, such as ducking the Dementors and avoiding the destructive influence. Are you trying to tell me that you have learned to duck Dementors? Snape asks, stunned. Gaunt shrugs. Sure thing I have. I've developed a ton of survival skills down here. Believe me, lad, that putting up with creatures that spread freezing coldness, misery, and suicidal thoughts is no fun at all. If you had to endure this for almost 50 years, you would have gone batshit crazy. Severus looks at Morphin. Scruffy-looking, unshaven older wizard looks exactly the same like he looked back in Little Hangleton 2 months before. Indeed, his recent stay in Azkaban doesn't seem to have made any impact on his body or on his mind. And there you have another reason I decided to come back. Gaunt goes on. 10 years ago, a year before my previous release, 10 kids were brought here. He indicates towards Bella and the other prisoners resting on the shore. 5 kids, each sentenced to a lifetime in the cesspool. These kids been treated like shit for some reason, from the very beginning. No furloughs for them, no medical supervision, no extra food rations, no sleeping mattresses. Obviously, them kids. Dumb like a bag of hammers, 0 experience, 0 survival skills, first encounter with them Dementors whatsoever. These are some passionate, hot-blooded, courageous kids. But exposed to the Dementors' influence like that, they were screwed like a bunch of house cats. So I helped. Sure thing I helped. I'd been helping them until I was released a year later. Yet forced to flee and hide from the old nutter, I figured I might as well check on them. It'd be a pity if them good kids gave in to the Dementors' terror. Morphin sighs. Obviously, this time around I had my wand. I wasn't dumb enough to let it be taken from me. With my wand and with my experience, I was genuinely able to take care of them kids. Mattresses and blankets, fresh water, basic checkups, even though I'm no healer. They all had scurvies. I'm good enough to heal it. They all had pellagra. You need a special supplement to cure that shit. But at least I could relieve their pain with a numbing spell. The same story with some nasty ulcers. They all had night terrors. I've been putting them to sleep each night like snakelets. Snape looks at the older man with a reluctant admiration. You're a good man, Gaunt, he says silently. Gaunt looks up at him. My Harry's told me that you were the one to finish off the old psycho, he says. Snape nods. You're some courageous kid, Gaunt says with acknowledgement. The entire wizarding kind owes you, you know. Snape nods again, absently. Heads up, lad, Gaunt says. It's all over now, ain't it? This nephew of mine, Scarlet, told me that we're all going to get the hell out of this place together. He's even mentioned some nice place we're gonna live in. Severus exhales slowly. He tries to cancel the events of the past hours of his mind. replacing the nightmarish memories with a beautiful image of Finland's medals. Yes, Snape says finally. We're all going home.